I thought I had it all. The penthouse, the designer clothes, the wealthy husband who promised me the world. But when I found another woman's lipstick on his collar that morning, everything I believed about my perfect life shattered in an instant. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "She's just a friend," while her perfume still clung to his skin. What happened next would teach him that underestimating a black woman's strength was the biggest mistake of his privileged life. By the time I was done, he'd lose everything he thought made him untouchable, and I'd discover a power I never knew I possessed. The revenge I served was so cold, so calculated, and so devastatingly perfect that even his racist mother couldn't save him from the reckoning I unleashed. If you're watching this story unfold, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because what I'm about to share will show you exactly how a woman reclaims her dignity when the world tries to erase her. The morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our penthouse bedroom, casting everything in a golden glow. I folded Ethan's white dress shirt with the same care I'd used for 3 years of marriage. My fingers moved automatically, smoothing the fabric, checking for stains or loose buttons. It was a routine I'd perfected back when we lived in that tiny studio apartment and every shirt mattered. The silk felt cool against my palms as I lifted the collar to fold it properly. That's when I saw it. A perfect crescent of red lipstick, bright as fresh blood against the white cotton. My breath caught in my throat. I brought the shirt closer to my face. The lipstick was fresh, still slightly sticky. Underneath it was a scent that wasn't mine. Something floral and expensive. The kind of perfume that cost more than I used to make in a week at the hotel reception desk. "Naomi, have you seen my blue tie?" Ethan's voice drifted from the walk-in closet, casual and rushed like every other morning. I stared at the red mark. It was shaped like a kiss, deliberate and intimate. My hands trembled slightly as I held the shirt up to the light. There was no mistaking what I was looking at. "It's on the dresser," I called back, surprised by how normal my voice sounded. Ethan emerged from the closet, already dressed except for his shirt and tie. At 32, he still had that boyish charm that had first caught my attention 5 years ago. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his green eyes sparkled with the confidence that came from inheriting more money than most people could dream of. But lately, there was something else in his expression, a distance that hadn't been there before. "Thanks, babe." He grabbed the tie and began knotting it with practiced ease. "Big presentation today with the board. Claire's been helping me prepare all week." Claire. The name dropped between us like a stone in still water. I'd heard it more and more lately. Claire from the office. Claire with the great ideas. Claire who understood the business in ways I apparently never could. I held up the shirt, the lipstick mark facing him. "Ethan." He glanced over, still focused on his reflection in the mirror. "Yeah?" "There's lipstick on your collar." His hand stilled for just a moment before continuing with the tie. "Is there? Must be from yesterday's client dinner. You know how those business events are. Everyone's air-kissing and being fake friendly." The explanation came so smoothly that I almost believed it. Almost. "This is fresh," I said quietly. "And it smells like perfume." Ethan turned to face me then, his expression shifting to something I couldn't quite read. Impatience, maybe. Or annoyance. "Come on, Naomi. You're overthinking this." He reached for the shirt, but I didn't let go immediately. "It's probably from when Mrs. Patterson thanked me after the charity auction. You remember how dramatic she gets. Mrs. Patterson was 73 and wore coral lipstick, not this vibrant red. But I didn't say that. Instead, I watched his face, searching for something I couldn't name. "Look, I'm already running late." He tugged the shirt from my hands and slipped it on quickly, not bothering to button it all the way before throwing on his suit jacket. "The car's probably downstairs already." I followed him to the bedroom door. "Who's Claire?" The question stopped him in his tracks. For a second, his carefully composed expression cracked, and I saw something that looked almost like guilt, but it was gone so fast I might have imagined it. She's a colleague, Naomi. We work together. That's it. His voice had an edge now, the tone he used when he thought I was being unreasonable. I thought you trusted me. I do trust you, I said, though the words felt hollow in my mouth. He softened then, stepping closer and touching my cheek with his thumb. Then stop looking for problems where there aren't any. I love you. Only you. The kiss he pressed to my forehead was gentle but brief. Then he was grabbing his briefcase and phone, already mentally somewhere else. I'll probably be late tonight. Another strategy session. He paused at the door. Don't wait up. And then he was gone, leaving me standing in our bedroom holding the faint scent of another woman's perfume in the air. I sank onto the edge of our king-sized bed, the one we'd picked out together 2 years ago when Ethan's company had its first major breakthrough. Back then, choosing a mattress had felt like planning our future. Now, sitting on expensive sheets in a penthouse I'd never dreamed of owning, I felt more alone than I had in the cramped hotel room I'd grown up in. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Ethan. Sorry if I seemed rushed. Love you. Long day ahead. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Love you too. Good luck with your presentation. But I didn't mean it. Not really. How could I when the image of that red lipstick mark was burned into my memory like a brand? I spent the rest of the morning moving through our apartment like a ghost. The space felt too big, too quiet. Every room was decorated with pieces Ethan had chosen. Modern art I didn't understand. Furniture that looked expensive but felt cold. The only things that were truly mine were a few family photos, and the small, succulent garden I'd started on the kitchen windowsill. By afternoon, I was sitting on the living room couch, staring out at the city skyline. From up here, everything looked small and distant. People moved like ants on the streets below, each one living their own complicated life. I wondered how many of them were sitting in expensive apartments, wondering if their husbands were lying to them. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Ethan. Dinner plans changed. Working late with the team. Don't cook. I read the message 3 times, searching for hidden meanings in every word. The team. Did that include Claire? Was she sitting next to him right now, laughing at his jokes, touching his arm when she made a point? I closed my eyes and tried to remember when things had started to feel different. It wasn't sudden, more like a slow fade, like a favorite shirt that loses its color after too many washes. The conversations that became shorter, the way his attention drifted when I talked. The phone calls he took in the other room. When we first met, I was working the front desk at the downtown Marriott. Ethan had been there for a tech conference, looking harried and overwhelmed after a flight delay had messed up his entire schedule. I'd managed to get him a room when the hotel was supposedly booked solid, and he'd looked at me like I'd hung the moon. You're a lifesaver, he'd said, leaning across the desk with a grin that made my stomach flutter. How can I ever repay you? Just don't leave a bad review online, I'd joked back. He'd laughed, really laughed, and asked if I wanted to grab coffee when my shift ended. 3 months later, he'd convinced me to quit the hotel and move in with him. You're too smart to waste your talents on checking people into rooms, he'd said. Let me take care of you while you figure out what you really want to do. At the time, it had felt romantic. Now, I wondered if it had been the beginning of making me dependent on him. Without a job, without my own money, without the daily interactions that came from working, I'd slowly become smaller, more invisible. The sun was setting when Ethan finally came home. I heard his key in the lock, followed by the sound of his briefcase hitting the marble floor of our entryway. Naomi? He called out. In here, I replied from the kitchen, where I was making myself a sandwich, even though I wasn't really hungry. He appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie. His hair was slightly mussed, and there was a lightness in his step that hadn't been there that morning. "How was your day?" I asked, not turning around. "Good. Productive." He opened the refrigerator and pulled out a beer. "The presentation went well. The board was impressed." "That's great." I took a bite of my sandwich, though it tasted like cardboard. "How's Claire?" If I'd expected him to flinch or stammer, I was disappointed. He twisted the cap off his beer with practiced ease and leaned against the counter. "She's good, smart, really gets the vision for where we want to take the company." He took a long drink. Actually, she had some interesting ideas about expanding into the European market. The casual way he talked about her felt like a slap, like she was just another colleague, someone whose ideas he respected, but nothing more. Maybe I was going crazy. Maybe the lipstick really had been from some client dinner, and my imagination was filling in gaps that didn't exist. But then his phone lit up on the counter between us. The screen showed a text preview. "Claire, thanks for dinner. Can't wait to discuss those projections tomorrow." Dinner. He'd said he was working late with the team, but this sounded intimate, personal, like it had just been the two of them. Ethan saw me looking at his phone and casually flipped it face down. "The team grabbed food after the presentation. You know how it is?" I nodded, though my chest felt tight. "Right. Of course." We ate in near silence after that. Ethan scrolled through emails on his phone while I picked at my sandwich. The quiet between us felt heavy, loaded with things neither of us was saying. Later, as we got ready for bed, I watched him in the bathroom mirror as he brushed his teeth. His movements were the same as always, but something in his expression had changed. There was a secret there, hiding behind his familiar green eyes. "Ethan?" I said softly. "Hmm?" He didn't look at me, focused on rinsing his mouth. "Are we okay?" Now he did look up, meeting my gaze in the mirror. For a moment, I saw something that might have been regret. Or maybe it was just my imagination again, seeing what I wanted to see. "Of course we're okay." He turned around and pulled me into his arms. "Why would you ask that?" I could have said so many things. About the lipstick, about the text messages, about the way he talked about Claire like she hung the stars, about how invisible I felt in my own life. Instead, I just shrugged. "Just checking." He kissed the top of my head, and I breathed in his familiar scent. But underneath it, faint as a whisper, was that floral perfume again. That night, I lay awake long after Ethan's breathing had evened out beside me. The digital clock on the nightstand glowed green in the darkness. 2:17 a.m. I turned onto my side and studied his sleeping face. Even in sleep, he looked different somehow. Younger, maybe. Or more relaxed than he'd been around me in weeks. I thought about the woman I used to be before I met him. The one who worked double shifts and went to community college at night. The one who had dreams of her own and friends who called just to check in. That woman wouldn't have let a red lipstick mark go without a fight. She would have demanded answers and refused to accept half-truths. But that woman also didn't live in a penthouse or wear designer clothes or have a husband who could buy her anything she wanted. That woman was stronger, but she was also alone. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but all I could see was that perfect crescent of red against white cotton, a mark that said someone else had been close enough to leave a piece of herself behind on my husband's shirt. Someone who wore expensive perfume and had a name that made him smile when he said it. Claire. The name echoed in my mind like a bell, and I knew that tomorrow would bring new questions, new doubts, new reasons to wonder if the life I'd built was as solid as it seemed. But for now, in the darkness of our bedroom, I lay still and tried to pretend that the space between Ethan and me was just the normal distance between two people sharing a bed, and not a chasm that was growing wider with every breath. Tomorrow, I told myself. Tomorrow I'd figure out what to do about the lipstick, about Claire, about the growing certainty that my husband was slipping away from me one secret at a time. But tonight, I would just lie here and remember what it felt like to trust him completely, before red lipstick marks and strange perfumes and text messages had taught me that love wasn't always enough to keep someone faithful. Outside our window, the city hummed with life. Thousands of people were out there, living their own stories of love and loss and everything in between. I wondered how many of them were lying awake in expensive beds, wondering if they even knew the person sleeping beside them anymore. The next morning came too soon, and not soon enough. I'd finally fallen asleep around 4, only to wake up at 6:30 to find Ethan's side of the bed already empty. The shower was running, and I could hear him humming, actually humming, like he didn't have a care in the world. I lay there for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling and trying to gather the courage to face another day of pretending everything was normal. The events of yesterday felt both distant and immediate, like a bruise that hadn't quite formed yet, but you knew would be there soon. By the time I made it to the kitchen, Ethan was already dressed and grabbing a travel mug of coffee. He looked good, better than he had in weeks. His skin had a healthy glow, and there was an energy in his movements that reminded me of when we first started dating. "Morning, beautiful," he said, dropping a quick kiss on my cheek before I could fully process his presence. "You're up early," I observed, wrapping my robe tighter around myself. "Big day ahead. Claire and I are presenting the European expansion proposal to the investors." There was that name again, rolling off his tongue like honey. "We've been working on this for weeks." I poured myself coffee with hands that were steadier than I felt. "Sounds important." "It is. This could change everything for the company. For us." He paused, checking his watch. "Actually, I might be home late again tonight. We'll probably need to celebrate if things go well." "We?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Ethan looked up from his phone, his expression carefully neutral. "The team. You know how it is with these big presentations." I nodded, taking a sip of coffee that tasted bitter despite the cream I'd added. "Right. The team." Something in my tone must have caught his attention because he set his phone down and really looked at me for the first time all morning. "Naomi, is something wrong? You've been acting strange lately." The irony of him asking me what was wrong would have been funny if it wasn't so painful. I considered telling him about the sleepless night, about the way his humming in the shower had made my chest ache, about how his excitement over work felt like a door closing between us. Instead, I forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just tired." He studied my face for another moment, then glanced at his watch again. "Look, why don't you do something nice for yourself today? Get your nails done. Go shopping. Take my card." The offer stung more than he probably intended. Once upon a time, I would have been excited about a day of pampering. Now it felt like a consolation prize, something to keep me busy while he lived his real life somewhere else. "Maybe," I said, though we both knew I wouldn't. He kissed my forehead quickly and grabbed his briefcase. "Love you. Wish me luck." "Good luck," I called after him, but he was already gone. I spent the first hour after he left sitting at our dining table, staring out at the city and trying to make sense of the knot in my stomach. The silence in our apartment felt different now. Not peaceful, but hollow. Like I was living in a beautiful shell of a life with nothing real inside it. Around 10, I couldn't take the quiet anymore. I got dressed and decided to take a walk, something I rarely did since we'd moved to this part of town. The streets around our building were clean and wide, lined with expensive shops and restaurants that catered to people who didn't need to look at prices before ordering. I found myself walking without direction, just moving, because staying still hurt too much. After about 30 minutes, I realized I'd walked all the way to my old neighborhood. The contrast was startling. Chain restaurants instead of boutiques, apartment buildings with fire escapes instead of doormen, people who looked like they actually lived in the world instead of floating above it. Without really meaning to, I stopped in front of the Marriott where I used to work. The lobby looked exactly the same through the glass doors. Same marble floors, same arrangement of chairs, same front desk where I'd spent 3 years checking people in and out of their temporary lives. Naomi? Oh my God, is that you? I turned to see Maria Rodriguez walking toward me, her face lit up with genuine surprise and joy. We'd worked together for 2 years, and she'd been one of the few people who'd really understood when I'd decided to quit. Maria! I hugged her tight, surprised by how good it felt to see a familiar face. How are you? I'm good, girl. Really good. She held me at arm's length, taking in my designer clothes and professional styling. Look at you. Living the dream, right? How's married life treating you? The simple question hit me like a physical blow. How was married life treating me? Like I was disappearing a little more each day. Like I was playing a role in someone else's story instead of living my own. It's great, I heard myself say. Really great. Maria's smile faltered slightly. She'd always been good at reading people. It was what made her such a good hotel employee. You sure? You look a little tired. Just didn't sleep well last night. I glanced back at the hotel lobby. Do you still work here? Actually, no. I got promoted to assistant manager at the new boutique hotel downtown. Better pay, better hours. It's been amazing. Her eyes brightened. Actually, we're looking for someone to help with guest relations. Someone with experience who knows how to handle people. You interested? The question caught me completely off guard. I don't really work anymore. Right. The princess life. She said it teasingly, but there was something in her expression that made me wonder what she really thought about my choices. But if you ever want to get back out there, let me know. It's good to have your own thing, you know? Your own thing. When was the last time I'd had my own thing? Even before I'd met Ethan, my job at the hotel had been just a job, but it had been mine. The guests knew my name. I'd been good at it. I'd mattered. I'll think about it, I said, though I couldn't imagine explaining to Ethan why I wanted to go back to work. We exchanged numbers, and I promised to call soon. As I watched Maria walk away, I felt something shift inside me. Not hope, exactly, but possibility. Like maybe there was more than one way to live a life. The walk home took longer than the walk away had. I found myself moving slower, reluctant to return to the beautiful emptiness of our apartment. When I finally made it back, I sat on the couch and stared at Maria's number in my phone for a long time. Around 3, my phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. Presentation went amazing. Claire was brilliant. Celebrating tonight. Don't wait up. Love you. I read the message several times, focusing on each word like it might reveal some hidden meaning. Claire was brilliant. Not we did great, or the team pulled it off. Claire. Singular. Special. I set the phone down and tried to remember the last time Ethan had called me brilliant, or amazing, or anything other than beautiful, which was starting to feel like a word you'd use to describe a painting you walked past every day without really seeing. The afternoon stretched endlessly. I tried reading, tried watching TV, tried organizing closets that were already perfectly organized. Nothing worked. The apartment felt like a cage, beautiful and comfortable, but still a cage. Around 5, I called my Aunt Ruth. She'd raised me after my parents died when I was 12, and she'd been the only person brave enough to ask if I was really happy when Ethan and I got engaged. Baby girl! Her warm voice filled the phone, immediately making me feel less alone. What a nice surprise. How are you doing? I'm okay, I said, though my voice cracked slightly on the words. There was a pause. Aunt Ruth had always been able to hear the things I wasn't saying. You sure about that? You sound a little wobbly. I closed my eyes, debating how much to tell her. Ruth had never been one for sugarcoating, and part of me was afraid of what she might say if I told her about the lipstick, about Claire, about the growing distance between Ethan and me. "Marriage is hard sometimes," I said finally. What's that boy done now?" Despite everything, I smiled. Ruth had never been particularly impressed by Ethan's money or charm. She'd liked him well enough. But she'd also warned me that marrying someone from a different world came with challenges I might not see coming. Nothing specific. Just, I feel like we're growing apart. Growing apart or being pushed apart? The question was so direct, so exactly what I'd been afraid to ask myself, that I couldn't answer right away. "I don't know," I whispered. "Baby, listen to me. I didn't raise you to shrink yourself small for any man, no matter how much money he's got. You hear me?" "I hear you." "Good. Now, you want to tell me what's really going on?" I almost did. The words were right there, ready to spill out. But something held me back. Maybe it was loyalty to Ethan. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the fear that once I said the words out loud, I'd have to face whatever came next. "I just miss having my own life sometimes," I said instead. Ruth was quiet for a moment. "Well, that's something you can fix, isn't it? Life's too short to spend it waiting around for someone else to make you happy." After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness of our living room and thought about her words. Life's too short. When had I started measuring my happiness by Ethan's moods? When had I started making myself smaller to fit into the spaces he left for me? It was almost 8 when I heard his key in the door. The sound made my stomach tense, which was wrong. Your husband coming home should make you happy, not anxious. "Naomi," he called out, just like the night before. "In here," I called back, though I didn't move from the couch. He appeared in the living room doorway, and I could immediately see that he'd been drinking. Not drunk, but relaxed in the way that came from several glasses of expensive wine. His tie was loosened, his hair slightly mussed, and there was a glow about him that spoke of success and celebration. "Hey, beautiful." He crossed to the couch and leaned down to kiss me. I caught the scent of wine on his breath, along with that same floral perfume from yesterday. Fainter this time, but definitely there. "How was the celebration?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Incredible. The investors loved everything. We're talking about opening offices in London and Paris." He settled beside me on the couch, his enthusiasm infectious despite everything. "This is going to change our whole future, Naomi. We're talking about really serious money now." "That's wonderful," I said, and meant it. I wanted to be happy for him, for us. But the perfume lingered in the air between us like a question I was afraid to ask. Claire was amazing today. She had this whole presentation about cultural marketing differences between American and European consumers. The investors were eating it up. His face was animated as he talked about her, more engaged than he'd been with me in weeks. "She sounds very talented," I managed. "She is. Really bright. And she gets the business in a way that—" He stopped abruptly, seeming to realize what he'd been about to say. "In a way that what?" I pressed. He shook his head, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "Nothing. Just, she understands the corporate world. It's her background." Unlike me. He didn't say it, but the implication hung in the air anyway. I'd never been to business school. I'd never worn a power suit to a boardroom meeting. I'd checked people into hotel rooms and smiled at tourists and made small talk with traveling salesmen. In his world, that probably seemed quaint at best. "I'm proud of you," I said, because it was true, and because I didn't know what else to say. He squeezed my hand, and for a moment, it felt like we were connected again, like we were on the same team. "I love you, Naomi. This is all for us. You know that, right?" I wanted to believe him. I wanted to sink into his arms and pretend that everything was fine, that the lipstick had been a mistake and the perfume was nothing and Claire was just a colleague who happened to be brilliant and beautiful and everything I wasn't. But as we sat there in our expensive living room, him talking about his bright future and me nodding at appropriate intervals, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were living in two different stories. In his story, he was the successful businessman conquering new markets with his brilliant partner. In my story, I was the wife who stayed home and waited and slowly disappeared. Later, as we got ready for bed, I watched him in the bathroom mirror again. He was humming that same tune from the morning, something light and happy that I didn't recognize. As he reached for his toothbrush, I noticed something I'd missed before. His shirt cuff was stained, not with lipstick this time, but with what looked like red wine. And there, just visible above his collar, was the faint mark of fingernails. Light scratches, barely there, but definitely fresh. My breath caught in my throat. Those weren't the kind of marks you got from shaking hands with investors or giving congratulatory hugs to colleagues. Those were intimate marks, personal ones. I turned away before he could catch me staring, my heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. In the bedroom, I climbed under the covers and closed my eyes, pretending to be asleep by the time he came to bed. But sleep didn't come. Instead, I lay there in the dark, listening to his breathing slow and even out, and tried to figure out when my life had become something I needed to pretend was okay. When had I started making excuses for red lipstick and strange perfume and scratch marks on my husband's neck? Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow I would stop pretending and start facing whatever was really happening in my marriage. Tomorrow I would ask the questions I was afraid to ask and demand the answers I was afraid to hear. But tonight, I would just lie here in the dark and mourn for the woman I used to be. The one who would never have let anyone make her feel this small, this invisible, this desperate for crumbs of affection from the person who was supposed to love her most. The clock glowed green in the darkness. 11:47 p.m. Somewhere in the city, other people were living their real lives, making real choices, refusing to accept less than they deserved. Tomorrow, I told myself, I would remember how to be one of them. I woke up to an empty bed and the sound of Ethan's phone buzzing on his nightstand. He must have forgotten it in his rush to get to another early meeting. The screen lit up with notifications, and before I could stop myself, I was reading them. 3 missed calls from Claire. 2 text messages that I could see the previews of. Where are you? The Thompson meeting is in an hour and call me ASAP. We need to talk about last night. Last night. I stared at those 2 words until they burned into my vision. What about last night needed talking about? The presentation was over. The celebration was done. What could be so urgent that she was calling him before 7 in the morning? I heard the shower turn on and quickly put the phone back where I'd found it. My hands were shaking as I pulled on my robe and headed to the kitchen. The coffee maker was already brewing. Ethan must have set it before his shower. Such a small, normal thing, but it felt like evidence of how separate our lives had become. He was taking care of his own needs now, not thinking about making coffee for both of us. When he emerged from the bedroom 20 minutes later, his hair still damp and his movements hurried, I was sitting at the kitchen island with my coffee, trying to look casual. "Damn, I'm so late," he muttered, grabbing a travel mug and filling it with coffee. Thompson moved our meeting up an hour. "You forgot your phone?" I said, holding it out to him. His eyes flicked to the screen as he took it, and I saw his jaw tighten slightly as he read the notifications. "Thanks." He scrolled through the messages quickly, his expression unreadable. Claire's been trying to reach me. Some last-minute changes to the Thompson proposal. Claire again. Always Claire now. "She called 3 times, I said, keeping my voice carefully neutral. "Did she?" He typed out a quick response, his fingers moving fast across the screen. "She worries too much. Everything's fine." But he didn't look like everything was fine. There was tension in his shoulders, and he kept glancing at his phone even after he'd responded to the messages. "What time will you be home?" I asked. "Not sure. Depends on how the meeting goes. We might need to do some damage control after yesterday." "Damage control?" I thought the presentation went well. He paused in the middle of putting on his jacket. "It did. But there are always follow-up issues, details to work out." His phone buzzed again, and he glanced at it immediately. "Look, I really have to go." He kissed my cheek quickly, but I caught his arm before he could pull away. "Ethan, wait. What is it? I'm really late." I looked into his green eyes, searching for the man I'd fallen in love with. He was still there, I thought, but buried under layers of impatience and distraction, and secrets I wasn't supposed to notice. "Are we okay?" I asked, the same question I'd asked the night before. This time, his answer came faster, more automatic. "Of course we are." "Why do you keep asking that?" "Because you smell like another woman's perfume. Because there are scratches on your neck. Because you look at your phone like it holds secrets more important than our conversation." "No reason," I said instead. "Have a good meeting." After he left, I sat in our quiet apartment and tried to remember what I used to do with my days before I met him. It seemed impossible that I'd once had a life full enough to keep me busy from morning to night. Now, with nowhere to be and nothing urgent to accomplish, the hours stretched ahead of me like an empty road. I kept thinking about Maria's offer from yesterday. A job, my own money, a reason to get dressed and leave the apartment and interact with people who didn't know me as Ethan's wife. The idea was both terrifying and thrilling. Around noon, I made a decision that surprised me. I called Maria. "Naomi, I was hoping you'd call. How are you feeling about the job thing?" "Tell me more about it," I said before I could change my mind. For the next 30 minutes, Maria described the position. Guest relations at a boutique hotel downtown, dealing with VIP clients, organizing special events, solving problems with creativity and grace. It sounded challenging and interesting and completely separate from the world Ethan and I lived in. "The pay isn't amazing," Maria warned, "but it's good experience, and the hotel treats its employees really well. Plus, you'd be great at it. You always had a way with difficult guests." "Can I think about it?" I asked. "Of course, but don't think too long, okay? I can only hold the position open for a few days." After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone for a long time. The smart thing would be to talk to Ethan about it, get his input, discuss how a job would fit into our life together. But something held me back. Maybe it was the way he dismissed my work experience yesterday when talking about Claire's corporate background. Maybe it was the growing certainty that he saw me as an accessory to his success, rather than a partner in it. Or maybe it was just that I needed to know I could still make my own decisions. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in months. I took the subway to my old neighborhood and walked through the streets where I'd grown up. Everything looked smaller than I remembered, but also more real somehow. The bodega where I'd bought penny candy as a kid. The community center where Aunt Ruth had made me take piano lessons. The library where I'd done homework and dreamed about college before life got in the way. I found myself standing in front of the small apartment building where Ruth still lived. She'd raised me in a 2-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor, and somehow it had never felt cramped or insufficient. It had felt like home. Before I could lose my nerve, I climbed the stairs and knocked on her door. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," Ruth said when she opened the door, but her smile was warm and welcoming. "Come in, baby girl. I was just making some tea." Ruth's apartment looked exactly the same as it always had. Comfortable furniture that had seen better days, but was kept meticulously clean. Family photos covering every available surface. The smell of vanilla candles and whatever she'd been cooking for lunch. "You look troubled," she said as she poured hot water over tea bags. "More troubled than you sounded on the phone yesterday." I accepted the mug gratefully, using the warmth to steady my hands. Can I ask you something? You can ask me anything. You know that. How did you know when Uncle James was cheating on you? Ruth went very still. She'd been married briefly in her 30s to a man who'd seemed charming and dependable until he wasn't. She'd never talked about it much, just said that sometimes people show you who they really are, and you have to believe them. Why are you asking me that? She said quietly. So I told her. About the lipstick and the perfume and the text messages. About Claire and the way Ethan's whole face changed when he talked about her. About feeling invisible in my own life and wondering if I was going crazy or if my instincts were trying to tell me something I didn't want to hear. Ruth listened without interrupting, her face growing more serious with each detail. The scratches on his neck, she said when I finished. You sure about those? I nodded. Fresh ones, like fingernails. She was quiet for a long moment, sipping her tea and looking out the window at the street below. Baby girl, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to really hear me, okay? I nodded again. Your gut is trying to tell you something. Women's intuition isn't magic or mystical nonsense. It's just your brain putting together pieces that your conscious mind doesn't want to acknowledge. She set down her mug and looked me straight in the eyes. You know what's happening. You've known for days. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I don't know, I whispered. What if I'm wrong? What if you're right? The question hung in the air between us. What if I was right? What if Ethan was having an affair with Claire? What if the life I'd built was just an illusion held together by my willingness to ignore the obvious? I got a job offer, I said suddenly. Ruth's eyebrows went up. Did you now? I told her about Maria and the hotel position, about the possibility of having my own income again, my own identity separate from being Ethan's wife. Sounds like exactly what you need, Ruth said when I finished. But Ethan doesn't know, and he might not like it. Baby, you're a grown woman. You don't need permission to work. She was right, but it didn't make the decision easier. Taking a job felt like admitting that something was wrong with my marriage, that I needed to prepare for a future that might not include Ethan. What if it ruins everything? I asked. Ruth reached across the table and took my hand. What if doing nothing ruins you? I stayed with Ruth for another hour, talking about everything and nothing. When I finally left, I felt steadier somehow, like I'd remembered something important about who I used to be. On the subway ride home, I made another decision. I was going to take the job. Not because I was planning to leave Ethan, but because I needed to remember what it felt like to be needed for something other than looking pretty and staying quiet. I called Maria before I could change my mind. I'll take it, I said when she answered. Really? That's amazing. Can you start Monday? Monday. 3 days away. 3 days to figure out how to tell Ethan without it becoming a fight. Yes, I said. I can start Monday. When I got home, Ethan still wasn't there. The apartment felt even emptier than usual, like it was waiting for life to happen inside it. I made myself dinner and tried to practice how I'd tell him about the job. Every version I came up with sounded either defensive or apologetic, and I hated both options. He came home around 9, looking tired but satisfied. Good day? I asked as he loosened his tie. Very good. The Thompson deal is moving forward, and we're getting calls from other potential clients who heard about our European expansion. He poured himself a glass of wine and offered me one, which I declined. Claire really impressed everyone today. She has this way of explaining complex market analysis that makes it accessible to people who don't have business backgrounds. Unlike me. Again, the implication was clear without him saying it directly. That's great, I said, though something inside me was starting to harden. I have some news, too. Oh, he looked up from his wine with polite interest. I got a job. The words hung in the air between us. Ethan's expression shifted from polite interest to confusion to something that looked like annoyance. A job? What kind of job? Guest relations at a boutique hotel downtown. I start Monday. He set down his wine glass carefully. Naomi, we've talked about this. You don't need to work. I make more than enough to support us both. It's not about money. Then what's it about? I struggled to find words that would make him understand without starting a fight. I miss having my own life, my own accomplishments. I want to contribute something. You do contribute. You support me. You make our home beautiful. That's important too. The words might have sounded romantic if they hadn't felt so much like a cage being described as a gift. I want to work, Ethan. I need to work. His jaw tightened. Did you even think about discussing this with me first? What if my schedule changes? What if I need you to attend events with me? You barely notice when I'm here, I said, before I could stop myself. The truth hit the air like a slap. Ethan stared at me, and for a moment, I saw something that might have been guilt flash across his face. That's not true, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. When's the last time we had dinner together without you checking your phone? I'm building a business, Naomi. This is a crucial time. With Claire. The words slipped out, and immediately I wanted to take them back. Ethan's entire body went rigid. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. You talk about her a lot. She's my business partner. Of course I talk about her. Partner, not colleague or co-worker. Partner. She calls you at 7 a.m, I said quietly. Because we have important projects to coordinate. His voice was getting louder now, defensive. I can't believe you're making this about Claire. She's done nothing but help advance my career. Our life, I corrected. Advance our life. Right, our life. Which is why I don't understand why you want to go back to checking people into hotel rooms when you could be here, supporting what we're building together. The dismissive way he said it, checking people into hotel rooms, made my chest ache. Like my work experience was something cute and quaint that I'd grown out of, not something that had value in its own right. I'm taking the job, Ethan. We stared at each other across our expensive kitchen, and I realized this was the first real fight we'd had in months. Not because we'd been happy, but because I'd been avoiding anything that might disturb the peace. Fine, he said finally, if that's what you want. But his tone made it clear that it wasn't fine at all, that this was another mark against me in a ledger I didn't even know he was keeping. That night, we went to bed without really talking, the space between us feeling wider than ever. As I lay there in the dark, listening to him breathe, I thought about Ruth's words. Your gut is trying to tell you something. My gut was telling me that my marriage was falling apart one polite conversation at a time, that my husband was in love with someone else and hadn't figured out how to tell me yet, that I was living in a beautiful lie that was getting harder to maintain every day. But my gut was also telling me something else, that I was stronger than I'd remembered, that taking the job was the first step toward reclaiming something important that I'd lost, that maybe, just maybe, I could survive whatever was coming. For the first time in weeks, I fell asleep without crying. Tomorrow was Friday. Monday, I would start working again. And maybe, slowly, I would start remembering how to be the kind of woman who didn't accept lies and lipstick stains and the feeling of being invisible in her own life. The woman I used to be was still in there somewhere. I could feel her stirring, getting ready to fight for the life she deserved. The weekend passed in a strange, tense quiet. Ethan worked both Saturday and Sunday, claiming he needed to prepare for meetings that couldn't wait. I spent the time getting ready for my new job, buying appropriate clothes, and mentally preparing to re-enter a world where I had value beyond being someone's wife. Sunday evening, as I ironed a blouse for Monday morning, Ethan appeared in the doorway of our bedroom. "You're really going through with this," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, I am." He watched me for a moment, his expression unreadable. "What if I asked you not to?" The question caught me off guard. A week ago, I might have folded. I might have put the blouse back in the closet and convinced myself that keeping him happy was more important than my own needs. But that was before the lipstick, before Claire's morning phone calls, before I'd remembered what it felt like to make my own decisions. "Why would you ask me that?" I said instead. He came into the room and sat on the edge of our bed. "Because I feel like you're pulling away from me, from us. And I don't understand why." The irony was so sharp it almost made me laugh. He was accusing me of pulling away while he spent every evening working late with another woman. "I'm not pulling away, Ethan. I'm trying to find myself again." "What's that supposed to mean?" I set down the iron and turned to face him. "When's the last time you asked me about my dreams? My thoughts about anything that wasn't related to your work or your schedule?" He opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. The silence stretched between us. "I thought you were happy," he said finally. "I was trying to be happy. There's a difference." Something in my tone must have gotten through to him, because his expression softened slightly. "Naomi, I love you. If something's wrong, we can fix it. But running away to some hotel job isn't the answer. I'm not running away. I'm running toward something." "Toward what?" "Myself." Monday morning came gray and drizzly, but I woke up with more energy than I'd felt in months. I dressed carefully in a navy blazer and pencil skirt that made me feel professional and competent. When I looked in the mirror, I saw glimpses of the woman I used to be. Ethan was already gone when I emerged from the bedroom. He'd left a note by the coffee maker. "Good luck today. We'll talk tonight. Love you." The note felt like a peace offering, but also like a warning. "We'll talk tonight." I wondered what he'd decided to say, what ultimatums he might deliver, what choices he'd ask me to make. But for now, I had somewhere to be that had nothing to do with him. The Grandview Hotel was everything Maria had promised. Boutique elegance without pretension, staff who seemed genuinely happy to work there, and an energy that reminded me why I'd loved hospitality work in the first place. "You must be Naomi," said the woman who greeted me in the lobby. She was about 40, with kind eyes and the confident posture of someone who knew her worth. "I'm Jennifer Santos, the general manager. Maria's told me wonderful things about you." The orientation was thorough and engaging. I learned about the hotel's history, its commitment to personalized service, and the specific challenges of managing high-end clientele. By lunch, I was handling guest inquiries and feeling more alive than I had in years. "You're a natural," Maria said as we grabbed sandwiches in the staff break room. I can already tell this was the right choice. "It feels right," I agreed. I'd forgotten how good it feels to be useful. Useful is one thing, but you look happy, really happy. When's the last time that was true? The question made me pause. When was the last time I'd been genuinely happy? Not content or comfortable, but actually happy? "I can't remember," I admitted. "Well, then this job is already worth it." The afternoon flew by in a blur of guest services and problem solving. I helped a businessman find a last-minute restaurant reservation for his anniversary dinner. I coordinated with housekeeping to accommodate a guest's severe allergies. I resolved a billing dispute with patience and creativity. Each small success felt like a victory, proof that I was still capable and valuable. At 5 o'clock, as I was preparing to leave, my phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "How was your first day?" I started to type back something cheerful and reassuring, then stopped. Why was I still trying to manage his feelings about my choices? "Good," I texted back. "Really good. Can we talk when you get home?" "Of course." The ride home on the subway gave me time to think about what I wanted to say. All day, I'd felt like myself again. Competent, engaged, valued for what I could contribute. I wasn't going to apologize for that or let anyone make me feel guilty about it. I found Ethan in the living room when I got home, pacing by the windows. He'd loosened his tie but was still in his business clothes, and there was a tension in his movements that made me wary. "How was work?" he asked, his tone carefully neutral. It was great, challenging and rewarding. I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed problem-solving. Good. That's good. But he didn't look like he thought it was good. He looked like he was steeling himself for something difficult. "Ethan, what's wrong?" He stopped pacing and turned to face me. "We need to talk." Those 4 words sent a chill down my spine. In my experience, conversations that started with "we need to talk" never ended well. "Okay." He gestured to the couch and I sat down, my heart starting to race despite my attempt to stay calm. "Naomi, I love you. I want you to know that whatever happens, I love you. Whatever happens." The phrase echoed in my mind like a death knell. "What's going on?" I asked, though part of me already knew. Things have been difficult between us lately. We both know that. And I think maybe we need some time apart to figure out what we both want. The words hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd been expecting them. All the lipstick stains and perfume and late-night work sessions had been leading to this moment. Is there someone else? The question came out steady, which surprised me. Ethan's jaw tightened. This isn't about someone else. This is about us. About how we've grown apart. That's not what I asked. We stared at each other across the expensive coffee table, and I saw the moment he made his decision. "Yes," he said quietly. "There is." The confirmation should have destroyed me. Instead, I felt something strange settle over me. Not peace exactly, but a kind of clarity. The not knowing had been worse than the knowing. "Claire," I said. "Yes." I nodded slowly, pieces clicking into place in my mind. "How long?" "Naomi, how long, Ethan?" He ran his hands through his hair, looking miserable. "A few weeks, maybe a month. It wasn't planned. It just happened." A month. A month of lies and gaslighting and making me feel crazy for noticing what was right in front of me. "So when you said she was just a friend, I was trying to protect you, to figure things out without hurting you unnecessarily. By lying to me, by trying to handle a complicated situation with as little pain as possible." I almost laughed. As little pain as possible, while I'd been twisting myself into knots trying to save a marriage that was already over. "What do you want, Ethan? A divorce?" The word hung in the air between us like a bomb. Ethan flinched as if I'd struck him. "I don't know. Maybe. I think we need space to figure out what we both want." "I think you've already figured out what you want." He had the grace to look ashamed. "Naomi, I never meant for this to happen. You have to believe that. But it did happen. And you chose to keep it happening." We sat in silence for a long moment. Outside our windows, the city hummed with life. People heading home from work, couples meeting for dinner, families putting children to bed. Normal lives, honest lives, lives that weren't built on secrets and lies. "I'll move out," Ethan said finally. "Give you time to decide what you want to do." "How generous," I said. And this time I did laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Naomi, please. I know you're angry, but I'm not angry." And surprisingly, it was true. I wasn't angry. I was something else entirely. I'm disappointed. In you, in me, in how little fight I put up for something I thought was worth saving. It was worth saving. Is worth saving. Maybe if we both take some time. To do what? To let you get this out of your system so you can come back when you're ready? That's exactly what he'd been hoping, I realized. He wanted to have his affair and keep me on standby, just in case things didn't work out with Claire. "That's not what this is," he said, but his tone lacked conviction. "Yes, it is. You want to explore your feelings for her without giving up your backup plan. But I'm not a backup plan, Ethan. I'm a person, and I deserve better than this." I stood up, surprised by how steady I felt. "You can move out whenever you want, but I'm not going to sit around waiting for you to decide if you want me back." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm filing for divorce." The words came out calm and clear, and I realized I meant them. This wasn't a threat or a negotiation tactic. It was a decision. Ethan's face went pale. "Naomi, wait. Don't make any big decisions right now. You're upset." "I'm not upset. I'm done." I walked to our bedroom and began pulling clothes from my dresser. I could hear Ethan following me, his footsteps uncertain. "Where are you going?" "To Aunt Ruth's. You can have the apartment while you figure out your next move." "You don't have to leave. This is your home, too." I turned to face him, a suitcase half-packed on the bed between us. "Is it? Because I haven't felt at home here in a long time." "Naomi, please. Can't we talk about this? Work something out?" "What's to work out? You're in love with someone else. You've been lying to me for weeks. You've made me feel crazy for noticing what was right in front of me." I zipped up the suitcase with more force than necessary. "I'm not going to be the wife who fights for a man who doesn't want to be fought for." "I do want to be fought for. That's the problem. I'm confused about what I want." "Then figure it out, but do it without me." I picked up my suitcase and headed for the door. In the hallway, I paused and looked back at him. "For what it's worth, I hope she makes you happy. I hope she's everything you think I'm not." "Naomi." But I was already walking away, my heels clicking against the marble floor of the entryway. Behind me, I heard him call my name one more time, but I didn't turn around. The elevator ride down felt like the longest and shortest journey of my life. When the doors opened in the lobby, I walked out into the cool evening air and took a deep breath. For the first time in months, it didn't hurt. I called a taxi and gave the driver Ruth's address. As we pulled away from the building, I looked up at the windows of our apartment and saw Ethan's silhouette against the light. He looked small from down here, diminished. "You okay, miss?" the driver asked, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "Yeah," I said, and was surprised to find it was true. "I'm okay." 2 months later, I was sitting in a coffee shop near the hotel, reviewing guest feedback reports, when I saw him. Ethan was at a table by the window with a blonde woman who could only be Claire. She was beautiful in the way I'd expected, polished and professional, with the kind of confidence that came from never having to doubt her place in the world. They were leaning close together, talking intensely about something on his laptop. She laughed at something he said, touching his arm in a gesture that was familiar and intimate. He looked happy, lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. For a moment, I waited for the jealousy to hit, the pain of seeing him with someone else. But all I felt was a strange sense of completion, like the last piece of a puzzle clicking into place. This was who he was when he thought no one was watching. This was the life he'd wanted but been too cowardly to claim honestly. He looked more like himself with her than he ever had with me, and I realized that was probably true for both of us. I gathered my papers and left the coffee shop without looking back. I had a guest event to coordinate and a life to live. A life that was mine, built on my own choices and my own worth. The divorce had been finalized last week. I'd kept my name and taken half of everything we'd built together, which turned out to be more than enough to start over. I'd moved into a small apartment downtown, close to work and close to the energy of the city. It wasn't the penthouse lifestyle I'd grown accustomed to, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every decision about paint colors and window treatments, every choice about how to spend my evenings. It was all mine. Maria had been right. Having your own thing was everything. As I walked back to the hotel, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. I heard about the divorce. I'm sorry. I hope you're doing well. Daniel, Ethan's friend who'd looked so uncomfortable that night at the event when Claire had openly flirted while I stood by in silence. I typed back, I'm doing very well, actually. Thank you for asking. He responded immediately, I'm glad. You deserve better than how things ended. I smiled as I put my phone away. Some people had more courage than others, but at least he'd tried to acknowledge what everyone had seen, but no one had wanted to say. That evening, as I sat in my small apartment reviewing applications for a management position I'd applied for at another hotel, I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago. The one who'd folded Ethan's shirts and made excuses for red lipstick, and tried so hard to be small enough to fit into the spaces he left for her. She seemed like a stranger now. Someone I'd once known, but had outgrown, like clothes that no longer fit. The woman I was now had calluses on her hands from carrying her own luggage. She made her own coffee every morning and paid her own bills and fell asleep reading books she'd chosen for herself. She was still learning how to be alone without being lonely, but she was learning. Some nights I missed the security of being taken care of, but I never missed the feeling of disappearing a little more each day. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Aunt Ruth's name appeared on the screen. How's my working girl? She asked when I answered. Good, busy, happy. That's what I like to hear. You sound different, stronger. I feel stronger. Good. That boy did you a favor, even if he didn't mean to. How do you figure? He showed you what you were made of. Turned out to be more than he could handle. I laughed, and it felt good. I love you, Ruth. I love you too, baby girl. Now what are you doing for dinner? I made too much chicken and rice. As we made plans for me to come over, I looked around my small apartment. At the plants I was learning to keep alive, the books scattered on my coffee table, the laptop where I'd been working on my resume. It wasn't the life I'd planned when I married Ethan, but it was the life I'd built from the pieces of who I was before I learned to be small. Outside my window, the city sparkled with lights from 1,000 other windows, each one sheltering someone's story of love or loss, or the complicated space in between. Somewhere out there, Ethan was probably having dinner with Claire, building a life on the foundation of what they'd torn down. And here I was, building something new entirely, something that belonged only to me. I'd learned that the most powerful revenge wasn't dramatic confrontation or calculated destruction. It was simply living well, thriving in the space where someone had tried to diminish you, and discovering that you were bigger than they'd ever imagined. The future stretched ahead of me, unwritten and full of possibility. For the first time in years, I couldn't wait to see what I'd do with it.